A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
I would like Trump's team to be more truthful, because all of this certainly does not have a positive impact on Ukraine, but it does help bring Putin out of isolation.
A tectonic shift in U.S. foreign policy. As we mark the third anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the White House appears to turn on Ukraine as President Donald Trump directs sharp criticism and falsehoods against Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky. Welcome to EWTN News In Depth. I'm Montse Alvarado in for Catherine Hadro. Monday marks 3 years since Russia launched an unprovoked full-scale invasion into Ukraine, beginning a new brutal chapter in a conflict that has been growing since 2014. This week, President Trump turned his attention to the war and, to the shock of many, appears to be upending decades of American diplomacy, siding with Russia against a democracy, Ukraine. He gave the green light for the start of negotiations to end the war, Russians and Americans at the table, but the Ukrainians and European partners not invited.
This whole negotiation from the start seems very tilted in Russia's favor. And it's even a question whether it should be termed a negotiation or, in some sense, a series of American capitulations.
It's a move that has sparked concern among analysts, European allies.
Bien que les Américains,
although the Americans obviously remain our allies, we must no longer depend on them for our security.
And Ukrainian leadership.
This Russian-American meeting in Saudi Arabia was a surprise for us, just like to many others.
This week, the United States held its first diplomatic meeting with Russia in years. Behind closed doors in Saudi Arabia, Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with top Russian officials on the relationship between the U.S. and Russia and the future of the war in Ukraine. It's an abrupt reversal in U.S. relations with Russia, which has slowly worsened since 2014, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea from Ukraine. When the Kremlin invaded its neighbor in 2022, the Biden administration sought to further isolate Moscow by shuttering embassies and implementing sanctions and bolstering Kyiv with billions of dollars in aid.
If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk. Europe is at risk. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away.
But with Trump at the White House, that strong friendship with Ukraine is beginning to sour. The president has often criticized his predecessor for sending aid to Ukraine. He says the U.S. will continue to send support, but the freezing of nearly all federal aid has left Ukraine without critical humanitarian resources. Trump has also been critical of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, this week saying he played Biden like a fiddle and falsely calling him a dictator and blaming him for starting the war.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Zelensky, in response, calling out the president for buying into Russian disinformation.
We have seen this disinformation. We understand that it is coming from Russia. Unfortunately, President Trump, with great respect for him as a leader of the people, which we respect very much, the American people, who constantly support us, unfortunately, lives in this disinformation space.
As relations with Ukraine plummet, U.S. ties with Russia progress. Trump spoke at length with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the phone last week, with both leaders promising to meet in person soon. Their delegates in Saudi Arabia promised to re-establish their respective embassies and begin working on a path to end the war in Ukraine. The meeting sent shockwaves through Europe, inspiring an emergency meeting of the continent's key leaders in Paris. Officials in the Trump administration say they will fight for a peace deal that guarantees a sovereign Ukraine that can defend itself. But to Andrea Kendall-Taylor, a former CIA analyst, the meeting seems to be playing right into Putin's demands.
The big risk there for me is that the Russians and Putin will pocket the concessions that are being made by the United States to strengthen its position, not just to sustain that aggression in Ukraine, but really to sustain what it views as a much broader confrontation with Europe and the West.
In Turkey, a sidelined Zelensky called for Ukraine to be seated at the table.
I'm convinced that for Ukraine and for our region, for Europe, It is critical that any negotiations to end the war are not happening behind the backs of key parties affected by the Russian aggression.
And as these discussions of ending the war take place, Ukraine faces a desperate situation against Russia's unrelenting attack. 3 years into its invasion, Russia currently holds about 20% of Ukraine's land. Ukraine struggles with a shortage of infantry troops and its key supply routes cut off by drone attacks. It's a critical moment for Ukraine and for the West, and Kendall Taylor says it sends a message to the United States' biggest adversaries.
Getting Ukraine right is the most direct and impactful way to deal with the deepening relationship between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea that we see. Because if you get Ukraine right, you can deter China, you can isolate Iran, and it would really take the wind out of the sails of the North Koreans. And I really do worry that Trump's interest in ending this as quickly as possible is really setting the United States and really global security up for future challenges.